Today's lesson is about hiding your ends. I get probably several times a month, I'll get an email from someone who says, "How do you hide your ends?" I'm never sure how to answer that, mainly because I don't hide my ends the way it's currently being taught by most rug hooking teachers, okay? A lot of times they will do this weird little thing where they'll pull the loop up inside the prior loop and then cut it off and then poke it back in. Or they'll pull up a loop, go one way, and then turn around and go the other way. But I find it still creates an artifact on top of the rug that if you do it repeatedly in the same place, such as on the edge of a building, you're gonna see it. And you haven't really fixed anything. So let's talk about the ways that I would fix this and what I do to avoid this kind of stuff, okay? So the very first thing is to use the right wool. And what do I mean by the right wool? Well, if you hook with textures versus solids, and what are those? Let me grab one of each really quick. Okay. For all intents and purposes, this has a little bit of modeling on it, but this is a solid. This is a texture, okay? It's not textury. I don't feel a texture. If I was blind, I couldn't tell the difference, but it has a visual texture on it. So in rug hooking world, we always refer to this as a texture, okay? Your loops do not show in textures. Why? Because there's so much other stuff going on. When you're hooking with solids, it's going to show up more. So if you've read the email that I sent out earlier today, because every Tuesday I send out a new email, and in the email, one thing I forgot to add that I'm going to add now, and I'll go back and add to the post later, is cut size. Hiding your ends or managing your ends, which is what I prefer to call it, is more important in wide cut than it is in small cut. When you have small cuts, you really cannot see the tails. They are so small. But when you double that size, say from a 3 to a 6, you definitely start to see the tails. And it becomes a little bit more of an important issue. So let me show you where you would want to hide your tails. In this piece, I've been experimenting with a stripe background. And one thing you can't do is move that end from one place to another. But my ends don't show up, but they are certainly there. Part of it is because this is a texture, and part of it is because of the way I cut them. And I will show you that tip in just a minute. The other tip is instead of ending it at the very end, because on most things you don't have to end it there. You could turn around and come back in the opposite direction. And I'll show you that trick in just a moment too. Here's another unfinished rug done in a smaller cut, but again, there are no tails. Like, it would be very unsightly to have a row of tails right there along the top of the head. So what happens is that this is hooked one way, I turn around and I hook it the other way. So let me show you on the back, and you can begin to see some tips if you're analyzing someone else's rug. You can see a spot like that. I know that that's a place where I stopped and started. I can also tell here that I've turned around and have gone back in the opposite direction. I haven't gone completely back and forth, back and forth. And again, like I said, I'll show you that in a moment. But as far as cutting, let's talk about cutting. Cutting is like the number one thing that I think can help you to hide your ends. And unfortunately, I couldn't find a place. Oh, that's close, but that's not quite. Let me show you this spot. Is that in the camera? There we go. I typically leave my tails long like this. And the reason for it is that I can then grab that tail and see if I have all the hooking done all the way around it. Clearly I don't. I need to come in here and put a little bit of the background in there. The same for this one. It might look like it's completely filled up, but when I go to cut it, I'm going to see that I have a little space right there. There we go. And that allows me to make sure that all the spaces get filled in the way they should. Now, if this were filled in, the way I would cut it is I would grab the loop and I would pull on it. And then take my scissor and put my scissor in there and simply snip it while it is under pressure. I think that is real important, because what happens is you're pulling on that wool and then you cut it, it springs back down a little bit further. So that's going to make it sort of snuggle down below the surface instead of sitting on top of the surface. The other thing that I'm using is I'm using offset scissors. These are scissors that are bent the right way. Some people will buy scissors that are bent this way and then cut. That's not the way. You want them to be bent so that you put your fingers in, but your fingers don't get in the way of the backing, and you can get the actual scissor cutting part flat on your rug hooking, and it cuts a nice square edge on it. Okay, so offset scissors. Do you need these right away? Absolutely not. This is the one thing that when you're ready to upscale your equipment, this would be one of the things that you can upscale to. In the meantime, you can use these, the old red-handled ones or the black ones. These are the Tim Holtz scissors that I love for snipping wool. You can use these for cutting your tails. You're not going to get quite as flat on it because they're not bent, but these do a wonderful job, and for a beginner, these are much cheaper, and you'll be able to continue to use them once you replace them with a pair of offsets. And those are Tim Holtz scissors. You can find the links for those in the Cindy Gay recommendations page. Just Google Cindy Gay recommendations. It should come up, and click on that page and look for scissors. The tails need hiding because what we don't want is a row of tails at the end. Now let's say you're hooking a building and you've got windows. You could have a tail, 2 to 3 loops, a tail, and then a window, then a tail, 2 to 3 loops, tail, window, and it's going to be nothing but loops. So what I do is I go back and I turn it, kind of think typewriter. And I shot a short video for you, and I am going to describe that as we go through. So here I am getting started with it, and I'm hooking on a window screen. You never, ever, 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 ever want to hook on a window screen. I'm doing that so you can see my hands underneath, okay? And I am hooking right now in a direction that I prefer. This is an easier direction for me to hook, even though the window screen is incredibly difficult to get my hoop in. So what my goal is to get this hooked all the way up to that rough black line at the other end. So imagine that this is a part of a building. And once we get up there, what we're going to do is, instead of actually turning around and going back the other way, we're going to do a side step. So it looks like I got maybe 1 or 2 more loops. This is probably going to be the last one. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to be very careful not to change my hands, not to change my frame of mind. I am just going to move over and hook a loop the same way I was hooking all the others. Now when I turn around and come back the other way, I change my technique, because when I hook from right to left, I have to pull it up a little bit higher and pull it back down. This is the way my hands work. But when I do from left to right, I can hook 90 miles a minute in one direction. So as we get to this other side, looks like 1 more loop. Again, I'm going to go up into that next place, and I'm not turning it like this. That's going to cause a bigger bump, and we don't want a bump on the back. So I'm hooking it as if I'm continuing to go in the same direction. And then once I get it up, then I can change my hands and I can start moving back in the other direction. Okay? Then I'm going to create a big loop and I'm going to cut it. I'm going to bury my ends in the middle of that building, okay, rather than at the ends. So if I need to add more wool to that, I'm going to do it in the middle, and I'm going to be very careful to stagger where I put those tails. I'm not going to put them all in the same place, right? I'm going to put one here, one here, one here. They're going to be strategically moved around the piece so that they're not all in the same piece. Let's watch this one more time. Instead of continuing or bending it around, I'm going to hold it the same way I've been holding it. And I'm going to hook it as if I'm going the same direction, which would be headed that way. Then I'm going to change my hands and come back and start hooking the other way. By burying those tails throughout the building and hooking my building in a texture or a spot dye, which most of my brick buildings are a spot dye, you can't find my tails. You literally can't see them. The other thing that I do very carefully that I know a lot of other rug hookers do not do is I never, ever, 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 ever cut two tails at once. Okay, I always do one and then I do the other one. Now, I'll tend to leave my tails up. So what'll happen is my rug hooking will get almost fuzzy because I'll have a bunch of tails up like this. But once I get this whole area hooked, I pick up my scissors and I go through and I snip one at a time, pulling on them each time to make them taut, but doing only one at a time, never ever doing two at the same time. When you do two at the same time, it's kind of like outlining your tails with like a big fat marker instead of a little skinny marker, right? You're going to be able to see that big doubled tail more than you're going to see two single ones that are cut slightly different, because you can never cut twice exactly the same way, right? So that's how I go about hiding my tails and making sure everything is taken care of. So if you want to see more videos like this, check out these and come join me in the rug cooking journey. So if you're here as a member, hop into the dashboard, log in really quick, and come join me in the Zoom room for the after show. That's it, everybody. I'll see you later.